Yo, what is going on, Raider Nation? First and foremost, shout out to you guys for tuning in and pulling up. We've got a lot to discuss. The Raiders versus Rams joint practice recap. There's a lot to talk about. A lot of players were making plays. I'm excited to get into it. So thank you guys. First and foremost, if this is your first time tuning in to Real Raider Ray and Pharaoh NFL, make sure you guys hit the subscribe button. If you're a new time watcher, smash the like button. It helps this video a lot, shoots us up the algorithm. We appreciate the love and support. Without you guys, this channel cannot grow. So we highly recommend you guys to do that. So without further ado, man, I don't want to keep my co-host waiting. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Hey, we are back. We are back to talk Raider football, and the Raiders just had another joint practice back to back. I don't remember the last time that's happened. Back to back weeks. Usually just one joint practice. They have two, and hey, to me, this is just an opportunity for this team to get better. Starters like we talked about in previous shows about what the positives that you get from joint practice. You have that ability to play against different players from different schemes and get better pretty much. And there's a lot to talk about from these last couple days.
Yeah, there is. So I mean, let's just get straight into it. The Raiders versus Rams joint practice recap. Everything reporting from camp is that the Raiders' defensive line dominated. Whether it was day one, day two, Max Crosby was apparently a menace around the field, creating plays in the backfield, getting in a fight with Cam Akers. Just I shouldn't say a fight, a little back and forth play going on the field, little extracurricular activity.
First notable fight, I would say. First notable fight,
yeah.
because there's probably some scuffles before that, but I felt like this one was like, oh, did you hear about what happened with Max and Cam Akers? Like it was kind of, and Max was kind of getting into it. You know what I mean? I don't know. I wish we had the audio of it, but he was kind
He
of
was smooth with that.
he was smooth, and he was kind of throwing some shade a little bit. Like he did what he had to
got
do.
what he got.
Yeah, he got what he got. You know,
What he
whatever that
got.
means. But I thought it was interesting though that he was saying that he felt like the team lacked a little bit of energy, and that was from day one, and that he felt like he needed to do something. So I don't know if that had something to do with it. He didn't fight. He didn't go over there and try to fight Cam Akers. It was more of the play was a little bit over, and Max kept going after the ball. Cam Akers didn't like that. The rest is history. They went back and forth.
And then it happened. So it is what it is. I love it personally. I think Max has brought a new level of energy to the defense, and it's not just Max. There's guys on every level that's holding their room accountable, and that's something you got to like. So at joint practice, tempers flare a little bit. That's all right with me. It's not like the brawls in times past where they would have to cancel practice. So I'm cool with that. Like that's normal. That's a part of football, and that's who Max is, and that's who that's what this defense is going to bring this season. They're going to show up and they're going to fight. You might put a score or two up on them, but they're going to fight. They're going to claw. So that's the new attitude. But look, in other news of the Raiders defensive line dominating, it didn't just come with defensive end Max Crosby. That's a given. The guy goes out there and dominates his reps. That's starting to become the normal for him. But there's also other guys. John Jenkins today in day two had a big fumble recovery. But he's also getting a lot of push on the interior. And I think that's also something the veteran defensive tackles in this room. And look, let's be honest, we haven't even really seen Jerry Tillery and Bilal Nichols. Those are kind of your penciled in starters. But the guys like John Jenkins and the Adam Butlers of the world, those veterans are starting to make some noise for themselves. So these younger guys on the back end of the roster, the Neil Farrells, the Matthew Butlers, they've really got to step up because Byron Young also had himself a day today as well.
There was a Matthew Butler sighting.
Okay.
He had a nice bull rush on, I believe, Grant Miller, where he pretty much left his feet. It was on one-on-one drill, so that was good to hear because in previous shows that we had, we were like, "Where's Matthew Butler?" We're not really hearing anything from training camp. Obviously, I think he didn't come until the fourth quarter last game against the Niners, which is not. It's not a good sign for a second-year player that you would think that would probably take that next step, and then you got other guys in front of him are playing way better than him, and that's a whole different conversation too, because when it comes down to it, do you think the Raiders would pull the trigger and cut Matthew Butler over some of these players that are outplaying him? It looks like.
Yeah, I don't think that they would really necessarily hesitate. if he's not bringing that value to that room. I mean, you don't have a ton invested into him, but I will say this, like, you've got a Byron Young who he flashed today. He was good in the run defense, but he's also flashing in pass rush is what I'm hearing coming out of joint practices. So it's nice to see a little bit of Byron Young emerging. But look, you also got guys like Nested Jade Silvera, who he's practicing really well. All the reports coming out of practice is that he's dominating practice. I just need to see that translate more over into the games. Like
Mhm.
week one, it was a little bit of a letdown with all the hype that he was getting. I didn't necessarily see Nested Jade pop off the screen by any means. He did have a few run gaps. He does have a high motor for a bigger defensive tackle. That is something that when I went back and watched the film, I was really happy with. And I shouldn't have said he had like necessarily a bad game. He flashed here and there, but I really want him to step into that player that we keep hearing about in camp. And if he does do that, look, Matthew Butler is not guaranteed a spot, especially if Neil Farrell can kind of edge him out in camp.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Like, yeah, it starts in practice because you build those good habits, but at the end of the day, if you're not doing it when the bullets fly, when game day, then at the end that's something that the coaches and the talent evaluators for the Raiders have to look at.
And let's be honest, like last year, his skill set was a needed asset to the defense, right? Because we didn't really have that interior pass rush. And this year, it's a little bit different. Bilal Nichols seems like a kind of different player from all reports coming out of camp. He looks good and looks fully recovered from his injury from last year.
Mhm.
Jerry Tillery has come into this offseason and kind of has a new fire under him. Adam Butler and John Jenkins have been a huge addition to these rooms. You got the Nested Jades, you've got the Byron Young. So that defensive tackle room looks a lot different this year. And I think that there's guys in there that can get after the quarterback. And we've kind of seen glimpses of that this preseason. So Matthew Butler is going to have to start separating himself a little bit if he wants to make this roster. And it's not going to surprise me if he gets cut.
Yeah, the D line led by Max Crosby, they did their thing against the Rams. Like they pretty much, just like the heading over there says, they dominated. But that being said, the secondary looked like they kind of struggled with better quarterback play from Matthew Stafford. Obviously, you know, Matthew Stafford is a solid quarterback,
Right.
and he was able to get what he wanted on to a certain extent. But that being said, there just judging from the not looking at the reports, they were stating that yeah, make sure to like the video and subscribe, man. Hey, we gotta, you know what I mean? Hold up. There you go.
There it is.
Make sure to like the video. But yeah, that being said, there are a lot of times where the D line was there. Max Crosby, you can even hear Matt Stafford in his press conference where he says every time Max Crosby was near him, he was yelling sack, sack,
Yeah.
sack.
Yeah. You got
If
to
he,
love
he
it.
was like, yeah, so you got to love that. But so that's sometimes when you're looking at players or quarterbacks completing passes against a secondary, you got to take it with a grain of salt because there are going to be moments where that would have been a sack. You know what I mean? The Raiders D line was dominating, but you still completed it because D line can't touch the quarterback, so it is what it is. But
Yeah, and
I think
from what I'm reading, the turnovers have still been able to happen. I believe they came away with 3 or 4 of them today in day 2. So one of them was a fumble recovery. I'm pretty sure there was another pick going on. I know Sam Webb got another tip ball interception. So he's one of those guys in the secondary that's kind of finding. It's not necessarily that he's standing out among all the other guys. It's just more he's in the right place at the right time and he's taking advantage of the opportunity. So hey, if the ball's coming your way and you can make a play on it and you're making the plays in training camp, then that's what this coaching staff is going to be looking for.
and just to touch on, another level of the defense because we talking about the secondary that wasn't, you know, their usual self. If you just look at all the training camp, last game against the Niners, uh, the linebackers, they were described as being not spectacular, but being in the right spots to make
Mm,
plays in the run game and obviously make plays in the pass game. So, which is not a bad sign. If they can
no.
be solid, and the D line obviously is going to be the D line and dominating, and the secondary just brings everything together. And his defense can take some steps this year, but it's a wait and see. Still early, but it's still good to hear.
Yeah, I'm just hoping the middle of the field isn't the liability in this Raiders defense this year. And it might be. I think you got to give your hats off to the front office for really building a defensive line, specifically in one off season, like the amount of talent it sounds like and how
Mhm.
dominant they've been in pretty much one off season in a draft. So that's pretty impressive to me. But the linebacker, yeah, it is a little bit shaky. But I want your honest opinion. Give me the gauge of this team for you this year. Like what are you feeling energy wise? Is there something different to you? Um, Kind of let me know how you feel about this Raiders team this season.
I look, I've the whole offseason up until this point, it's kind of wait and see, wait and see. But I've kind of been surprised by some of the things I've been hearing about the defense. You know, these continuing reports that the defense is flying around, forcing turnovers. And obviously we've seen it on our last game, preseason game against the 49ers. Even though it was the second, third team players, that's still depth that we needed, we do need on this team. But I'm kind of like, you know what? I can see a scenario where the Raiders can be, I don't want to give predictions too this early, but I can see a scenario where they can be a wild card team. I
Mm,
can see a team where they can surprise some of these teams that they're playing this year with their defense. Obviously, I feel like they're going to be well coached. Hopefully, this is me being positive here. I think they can be well coached on offense, still be efficient because offense wasn't an issue the year before. If we can get Josh Jacobs back, that's going to be a huge lift for this offense. Then obviously with Jimmy G, and we're going to get into everything in offense. I don't want to get too much into what we're going to talk about, but I just feel like with this team, I feel like there's a chance where it can all work out this year. But a lot of things have to happen. A lot of things got to go right.
yeah, and I don't want to come out and sound too bold, but I'm gonna take my observations and I'm gonna be truthful in them. And I feel like when I watch this defense and I watch these press conferences and I watch the attitude of the offense and I'm hearing the coaching staff talk, this genuinely feels like this team right here that we have feels like the actual foundation of the Raiders taking a step forward into the future in the right direction. It
Hmm.
feels like this franchise has really hit that reset button, but it kind of accelerated a little bit, right? With last year, I'm taking last year and kind of balling it up. You came away with a few good things, right? You went and got Devontae, but this was your first initial draft, and I feel like what speeds up franchises to get back to successful grounds quickly is nailing the draft. And from all reports, I think the Raiders, and I'm not trying to speak too early, but it sounds like the Raiders had a really solid draft class.
Hmm.
And if this can accelerate where they're at fundamentally, look, I think they're in a really good spot because I think they went out in free agency this year and they didn't spend big, but they spent um, at crucial positions to get depth. And the Raiders have lacked depth for a long time. And
Right.
it feels like the foundation of this team is built on really good football players that has a solid layer of depth. Now, the next 2 to 3 years, I would say next year after another solid draft, this draft coming into this year is heading into their second year. You get another free agent class, which the Raiders have a ton of money next year. I think you're going to see the pivot in this organization starting this year, and next year, I think we can just kinda take the ball and run with it.
Yeah, it can happen. But like I started every what like I said earlier, it's it's a wait and see for me because I need
Mm,
to see Josh McDaniels coach winning football.
yep.
I need to see it. I need to see it. I need to see his guys because that's literally what happened this offseason. There was a purge. They got rid of a lot of players or got brought in players that fit the system. So I need to see it, and if I see that, then I everything else will make sense. Everything else will come together because I agree from what we've heard and what we've seen from some of these young players that've been drafted, they look like they can be future players for the Raiders, future starters. But wait and see. But we didn't even mention Tyree Wilson, the
Mm,
return,
the return of the
the
first-round
return
pick.
of Tyree Wilson. I mean, he hasn't really played Raider football for that long, but that being said, he's back from injury. We were kind of talking about that in other shows, and we were kind of concerned and like, is this going to be a nagging injury? Is he going to be? But it's the Raiders officially removed him from the non-football injury list, and right now he's just doing just non-contact drills. He's not doing any one-on-one drills or team drills, so they're going to bring him back slowly. Which, hey, at the end of the day, I have no problem with. They're going to slowly integrate him in that defense, and even this year, to be honest with you, he's going to be the third pass rusher.
Mhm.
I think it's gonna be Max and Chandler Jones starters. He's gonna be the third pass rusher, and then also they're gonna bring him inside to create one of those third down packages where they can cause some pressure and just learn from Max. Learn from Max and Chandler Jones. I like that, but in order for that to happen, he needs to be healthy. So this is a good sign that he's back.
Yeah, and I like the fact that Max Crosby pulled him off when special teams drills was going off. He pulled Tyree off to the side and just personally was working with him one-on-one on technique, get
Mhm.
off. So those are things that you like to see that Max Crosby is taking Tyree under his wing, so to say.
Yeah.
My expectations for him for year one aren't huge, and I'm really curious on how they're going to decide to use him because let's say Chandler Jones isn't having success, and it's about the same time as last year, where week 5, week 6, you're kind of like, all right, where's Chandler Jones at? Does that mean Tyree Wilson gets an increase in production and Chandler Jones kind of takes a back seat a little bit? I'm just really intrigued with how they're going to use him because with the guys on the interior, Byron Young, Jerry Tillery, Bilal Nichols, some of those guys flash production when it comes to pass rush. So is Tyree really going to be your third down premier rusher? Are you going to get a NASCAR package where all those guys are on the field? Max, Chandler, Tyree.
Mhm.
It's going to be really interesting, but I'm really curious also, how do you feel about him getting reps this preseason, or do you think that they're gonna hold him off until week 1
With Tyree Wilson.
with Tyree Wilson? Yeah,
Yeah, I take their time. It's
yeah,
not a situation where he's coming in and he's the guy that they need to rely on starting on the edge, and it's that's the other side to it is the fact that like the Raiders have that ability to take their time with Tyreek Wilson. I just want him to get healthy. I don't want this to be a
right.
lingering issue. I don't want it just to keep coming back. So make sure take all the proper steps, be conservative because you have Max Crosby, you got Chandler Jones, who's been actually missing. So I don't know what happened. He's been missing since last week, the joint practice from last week. So he hasn't. We got to keep an eye on that as well. So I think he might be dealing with something. But that being said, you got Max, Chandler Jones, and let him come in slowly. And then once he's like fully healthy, you're still going to be putting him in spots, letting him learn from two great players. A guy Chandler Jones at different stages too. You got Chandler Jones, who's kind of like the older statesman, who's been there, done that, and then you got a guy like Max Crosby, who's doing it right now.
Oh,
He is
100%.
he is the face of the Raiders. Would you say that he is the face of the Raiders? Like if you had to pick one guy who is Mr. Raider on the Raiders right now, would you pick Max Crosby?
More so than Devontae,
I think
more
you need to show everybody the jersey right behind you, man.
that's the man right there. But,
Yeah,
no, more so than Devontae, more so than Josh, who isn't here with the team. Max Crosby, I mean, not only would he be the face of the franchise for the Raiders in present, Max Crosby is the face of the Raiders past. I mean, he embodies what it meant to be a Raider. And I think that's why he has clicked with this fan base. And I know that this coaching staff is in love with Max. I would imagine Max is probably going to be a Raider his whole career.
yeah.
Um, so that's something that you got to love too, because it's homegrown talent, someone who's bought into the organization. I couldn't be more happy with where Max Crosby is at this point. His
Mhm.
development exceeded everybody's expectations, um, and now he's not only turning into the face of the Raiders, he's moving into that category as one of the elite players in the National Football League.
Yeah.
Highly disrespected, but I think a lot of that noise is going to change this season.
Highly disrespected, but
Highly
that's a whole
disrespected.
different conversation
Yeah,
for
that's a whole
another
different
day.
yeah, we'll get into that later. But no, man, I wanted to kind of pivot a little bit over to the offensive side of the football. Um, really, and you can kind of get into your opinions as well, but what I'm kind of taking away from these joint practices against the Rams specifically, and a little bit of what we've seen in the game of the 49ers, is that the front offensive line and defensive line, the fronts of this team is really getting after it in training camp. It seems to be like that's where the Raiders are trying to make their money, is winning inside of the trenches, which is where all good football teams win. Um, and look, to be honest with you, today what stood out to me was that Dalton Wagner and McClendon Curtis are getting second team and third team reps.
Mhm.
So they seen something that they really liked out of Dalton Wagner in that first preseason game against the 49ers, to the point that he got second team reps today. And I guess he held his own very well. So I think this is something to kind of monitor here a little bit. Not saying that he's going to be the Raiders starter, not saying he's even going to be the Raiders backup, but Dalton Wagner's really making a case to really make this roster, specifically with Brandon Parker going down.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, Parham being out,
Yeah.
kinda has the Raiders shuffling that interior, O-line, and I think Netane Moody got the start at left guard, which I thought was interesting. I don't know if that's a sign of the coaching staff really valuing him as a possible, guy that they're on the 53-man roster, but he got the start. And then obviously, on the other side, I think it was Rutan. Roten,
Mhm.
I keep messing up his name, man. Hopefully he doesn't watch this and sends me a DM. Like, but nah, but he was starting. But from what I was hearing on team drills, they didn't really run the ball that well. Pass protection was a lot better. But overall, they're in on drills. That from what I heard, like the D line did get some pressure on the O line, so they were able on day two. Day two, they were able to get some pressure, get to the quarterback a little bit more. But hey, man, this is iron sharpens iron at the end of the day, man. And guess who was there day two? Day one, Aaron Donald wasn't there.
Mm.
Day two, Aaron Donald was able to make an appearance, and I think him being there, and obviously Aaron Donald is going to do what Aaron Donald does, and that means getting to the quarterback, winning one-on-ones, and I think that kind of energized that D line, and they were able to, probably get to the best of the online in spots overall. But that being said, I think that, overall, I think that joint practices are really good as far as, getting better as a team. So, even Max Crosby, like he's over there talking to some of the players on the other team and giving them sharing tips and stuff like that. And I'm sure, there's other players doing that as well with other key players that are winning these battles. So this is just it's a great way to get better. So yeah, man. But going
And
on
from
to yeah, do you have more something to say about the O-line?
Yeah, just one last closing statement because the right guard conversation has been huge, right? This entire offseason. Who's going to be the guy? Is it Alex Bars? Is it, Netane Moody? Is it going to be Van Roten? From all reports of what I'm hearing, Van Roten is the guy. Van Roten is the guy going into week one. He's going to be your starter. He
Mm,
plays with an edge. From all reports, I know Hondo Carpenter released today his statement about Van Roten, specifically saying that he has flashed more than anybody on the offensive line, not named Colton Miller.
mm,
So to get some praises like that from a guy who's pretty well respected covering the football team is, I believe that Van Roten is going to be your guy week one, and he brings a little bit of that Raider edge. He's a bit nasty. I like what he brings in the run game, but he's also an underrated pass protector, and it's something that I really didn't see in his game. But I don't know if this is a Carmen Brasillo thing. I don't know if he's just kind of the O-line guru, but he
yeah.
seems to find these guys and put them in situations where they can find success.
I hope, man. I'd rather see him over Alex
Alex
Bars
Bars.
because I feel like
Yeah.
at this point we kind of know what Alex Bars is. He's a good running
Yeah.
blocker, but pass protection, he's a liability, and he's kind of proved that time and time again.
He's a good backup guard.
No, he's a good backup player, but as far going into the season as starter, it's just like it makes you kind of cringe a little bit.
And look, he came in a rough situation last season and plug and played, and for given the situation and the circumstances, yeah, okay, I see why the Raiders like him. And he came in and he played well.
Hmm.
So hang on to a guy like that for depth. And if Van Roten can come in here and be alongside Jermaine Illuminor, or at this point, whoever tends to earn out that right tackle spot, I'm still going to lean it's Jermaine Illuminor is definitely the starter. Um, but no, I just wanted to kind of cover up that Van Roten looks to be the guy heading into week one.
Yeah, man, that's good to hear. That's good to hear. But also the receivers,
Mm,
we got to talk about the receivers, man. The
okay.
divas, but we don't have any divas at receiver, man. Surprisingly, even though we have the best receiver in the game, Devontae Adams, Hunter Renfro, and company, Jacoby Myers, they're just abusing the Rams secondary. They continue to do work. They're pretty much winning their one-on-one, 7-on-7 team drills. I think day one it was a lot more domination than day two. I thought, from what I've seen, the team drills 11-on-11. The Rams kind of, held their own in spots, but overall, the Raiders they're going to have one of the best receiving cores in the league, and it all starts with Devontae Adams, and everything else just comes together. But they've been playing well, and then Father and Ham, he's continuing his good play from last game to making good catches and getting good separation. So he's been playing well. And Trey Tucker, from what I'm hearing, is bouncing back this week after a rough game against the Niners. He was able to have a good week against the Rams. So
We always gloss over Jacoby Myers, and I don't know if you remember, um, but before we kicked off free agency, me and you were talking. I had told you, hey, my number one wide receiver target for the Raiders is going to be Jacoby Myers,
mhm.
and we kind of talked about that because at the time we were like, yeah, but do the Raiders really need a wide receiver? And I was like, no, like Jacoby Myers should be the number one wide receiver option. And look, everything coming from camp, my bold prediction, and I feel pretty confident saying it. I think that this is going to be Jacoby Myers' first 1,000-yard season, even under a guy like Jimmy
Mm,
Garoppolo. I just think he's stepping into an offense that he's about to thrive in. I think he's going to get a lot more coverage. He went from a one in the New England system, and everybody knew that he was the one. When you come over with the Devontae Adams and the way that they run the offense, specifically using the tight end and the backs out of the backfield, just coverage, you're only going to be able to do so much. And I think Jacoby Myers is going to have a lot of open one-on-one coverage. And I think over the middle specifically is where he's going to thrive in this offense. Those 20, 25-yard over the middle. A lot of last year we ran a ton of dagger concept. That's something that Jacoby Myers is going to do really well.
mhm.
So, yeah, for me, I think Jacoby Myers, from all reports, has just had a phenomenal camp. And I've also heard it say that as much as you talk about Devontae Adams and Max Crosby, that Jacoby Myers' name needs to be put in that mix as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's been making plays. I just keep seeing the beat writers that are there reporting that he's just getting chunk plays after chunk plays. A favorite of Jimmy G and all the quarterbacks are throwing to him. So it's a good sign, man. I was surprised when the Raiders kind of signed him because I felt like maybe we could have went somewhere else with it. We could have made a splash signing maybe on defense, maybe get some other guy. But I wasn't really mad about it because, hey, man, it just makes a Raider strength even stronger.
Mhm.
I think losing kind of Hollins, even though Hollins going into last season, we didn't really expect him to hold down the fort. But I feel like this is actually an upgrade
Oh, it's an upgrade.
from Hollins, and I think it fits too as well. The versatility to play inside and outside, and then you got a quarterback like Jimmy G, who obviously who likes to throw down the middle of the field, who likes to throw it short, intermediate parts of the field. You got players that can get open on those parts of the field, so it makes sense. It fits. It
And on
fits.
top of that, the value of the contract. Like if he goes out there and puts up 1,000 yards, and I think he signed a 3-year, like $33 million deal.
Yeah,
Like he's getting $11 million a season, which right now that market value wise, it's just a phenomenal grab.
yeah.
So no, all signs point to stock up for Jacoby Myers, and I'm excited to see him. He's just one of those. He's a dark horse candidate in this offense. I think he's the guy that nobody's really talking about enough, and I think he's going to come out and really turn some heads this season.
And I like the fact that he's gonna see his fair share of one-on-ones to
Oh
because
yeah.
because because Devontae is gonna take away that attention, and hopefully we can get Josh Jacobs back. That's gonna take away a little bit more attention, and guys like Jacoby Myers, Hunter Renfrow, and you got the tight end, young tight end. I can't wait to see, basically take advantage of one-on-ones that they're opportunities that they're gonna get.
Yeah, no, 100%. So heading
Mhm.
into the Raiders versus Rams game preview, we just got through joint practice. From all accounts, it sounds like both teams had a really good training camp, had really good joint practices. Both got in good work. Raiders probably edged out the Rams here a little bit within these 2 days. Now we're going to see if they can carry that over into Saturday's game. Farrell, what are you looking for out of this Raiders team heading into the second game of the preseason? Maybe some takeaways. Are you looking for the defense to still get after and create turnovers? What are you looking for specifically?
I want to see the Raiders to continue this defensive pressure that they've been
Mhm.
doing. You know what I mean? I want to see them. I want to see them continue to pressure the quarterback, force some turnovers. You know what I mean? Capitalize on those drop interceptions because even though we were so excited about last game and what we saw from the backup players and how they were able to force some turnovers, but there were some missed opportunities. Hopefully, they'll be able to capitalize, jump on them early. Aiden O'Connell time. Aiden O'Connell time. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of him playing that next game and let him get better. Let him get used to playing in the system. As a fan, you definitely want to see the starters. You want to see the best player play, but this is the time of year that you want to stay healthy. That's the name of the game. You got to stay healthy. NFL is not for long league. You want to keep some of these players healthy going into the season. So I understand that for the Raiders, the joint practices was time for the starters to go in and get some time against a different team, and they kind of got that out the way. I think in my opinion, I think that it's probably going to, for the majority, I think it's going to be backup players playing mostly next
Mm.
game. So, and I think Jimmy G was actually asked an interesting question about that too as well.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up, speaking of starters, Jimmy Garoppolo was asked a question about potentially starting for the Raiders this Saturday.
Perfect. But things are going to happen, and we just got to keep learning and keep growing as a team right now. I think that's the biggest thing.
I know you're always getting prepared to play and want to play, but do you think it's important to get out there at all during the preseason? Maybe you and some of the starters at all, or is it not important?
I mean, it's always good to play. I mean, get knock some of the rust off and everything like that. We went through the warm ups last week, so I think in the next couple of days we'll find out, what we're doing come Saturday. Josh will give us the answer for that, but yeah, we're always ready to roll. So we'll see what happens.
Whatever you're like.
So excellent, non-answer of that question. I don't
Yeah, I was
know.
gonna say, what do you take away from that? Do you think you could see Jimmy G suit up for a drive or two?
I don't think so. I
No,
don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so
I
either.
mean, if we're going off history, last year Derek Carr didn't, when he was a starter for the Raiders, he didn't play not one snap in preseason. And when you got a guy like Jimmy G who's coming back from injury, who's getting stronger and healthier every day, they want to continue that. They don't want to put him in jeopardy playing in a meaningless preseason game. So I think that Jimmy G and the starters are going to be held out because they got good work the last couple weeks,
Mm.
which is against the Niners and the Rams this week. So I think it's going to be more of some of the young players that are trying to make the team, which is still valuable experience, still valuable to this team because they're going to have to determine who's going to be on that 53 man roster.
Yeah, and I think what I'm really kind of trying to take away from this game too is can we continue the energy that we've had, continue to get our hands on the football, but specifically I want to look at the trenches again. I want to see the big guys get nasty. I want to see the offensive line get in there, put hands on people, put guys in the dirt. All the reports was that offensive and defensive line was dominating these joint practices. So let's see that translate over. Kind of the themes that we see in these practices, I like to see those carry over into the games. And if you can do that, it tells you that you're starting to gain ground on success and production, and you're starting to get somewhere as far as growing as a football team. So if the defensive line can go in there and get after the quarterback, make a mess of things. We've heard of all these reported sacks where, Max Crosby was in his face. That was with multiple players. So
Mm-hmm.
let's see what the second team, the third team, if they can generate pressure for 4 quarters and get after the quarterback, how ugly they can make these games. And if you can do that, you're probably going to get another victory here in the preseason. So transitioning over into that, players to watch. Is there anybody specifically that you're looking for, maybe defensively, that you're looking forward to watching this game?
Defensively, if I'm thinking about some of the backup players, I want to see Malcolm Kuntz actually make
Mm.
some plays for this coaching staff. That's the guy that on the D line that I want to see. Like I mentioned, the D line, but also want to see Jacorian Bennett out there. There's still a young player that he did play against the Niners. He didn't play bad. It's just that D line and the defense was playing so well. Like you almost didn't notice him out there. He was just doing his job. So I still want to see Jacorian Bennett. And from what
Somebody
I'm
needs to test him already. I just
yeah,
want to see it.
yeah. That's what I'm hoping. Maybe Stetson Bennett because he's like the backup, or is he the backup quarterback? Has he?
Yeah, that's a
It
good
sounds
question.
like he's
I
taking.
think he is. I think he's the backup.
Yeah, from what I'm hearing, like he's kind of it's Stafford and Stetson Bennett kind of going after playing against the Raiders during these joint practices. So yeah, so I'm looking at the D line. I'm looking at people in the secondary. Guys like some of these young players that they drafted, Christopher Smith. I want to see him make
Yeah,
some
that's true.
plays. You know what I mean? Because I know you're big on him, and you could see him possibly making a impact on his team. But I definitely want to see him making
Yeah, I
plays
just
out there.
haven't seen him splash quite yet. He's
Yeah.
one of those guys that got a lot of buzz, but I just haven't quite seen it yet. For me personally, my eyes are moving over to the linebacker room. With all these question marks going up in the air with the linebackers, I want to watch Amari Burney. He got a sack last week. He was able to be good in coverage and could have a potential interception. I want to see him continue to grow on his production because I think he could carve out a nice little role for himself here in this Raiders defense. Also, I want to see, like you alluded to, Malcolm Kuntz. I think he edged out Adam Plant Jr., so we can kind of cross that off the list. He's clearly a better player at this point in his career.
Yeah.
Now can he go out there and compete with Jordan Willis, who is probably the backup edge defender right now in the defense? Good run stuffer, got after the quarterback a little bit last week against the 49ers. So Malcolm Kuntz up against Jordan Willis this week. Can he go out there and make an edge for himself and kind of carve out a situation where he is the clear pass rusher? And also a guy who we haven't got to see much as training camp, David Long Jr., has come back to joint practices at the defensive back position. I'm curious to see what he can do in the secondary. One of those guys that we talked about maybe being better suited for the man coverage Patrick Graham scheme than what he was formerly with the Rams in that zone heavy scheme. So I'm kind of keeping my eyes on David Long Jr. since the secondary is kind of mixing in and out. But offensively, who are you looking at offensively for some players to kind of watch?
Some of the players that we listed as player stock down, and Zamir White and guys like Trey Tucker. I want them to bounce back. I want them to catch footballs, aka Trey Tucker. He had a good week in practice against the Rams. Continue that against during the preseason game, and I want to see Zamir White just take hold of that second, that backup spot at running back. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's his. It's not like they're going to take it away from him. There's no one that's healthy enough to actually take it away from him. Hopefully Brenton Brown could come back soon, because I do want to see more competition at that spot, because from what we seen last game, we kind of seen a player that I'm not sure if he's ready to be a starter. You know what I mean? So that's why I'm hoping like Josh Jacobs he kind of ends it right before the season starts, and everybody goes into their place. And I think if Zamir White offensively can play better next game, that'd be a big boost in my confidence in him.
Yeah, and I think me personally too, a guy like Michael Mayer. Is Michael Mayer finally going to get reps in this preseason game? I know he came back to practice, didn't hear too much, but is this a guy that's going to get snaps week 2? That's something that I'm going to be curious to see, that connection with Aiden O'Connell. We've seen Cole Fotheringham have 5 receptions, 71 yards last week. Let's kind of see Michael Mayer, if that's exactly how they're going to use him and get him out in space and over the middle seam routes. I'm curious to see Michael Mayer. I'm also curious to see Dalton Wagner at the right tackle position. I think he's really starting to make a name for himself and maybe really making a case for him to make the roster. And if not make the roster, then definitely be protected on the practice squad.
Yeah.
And for me, the big one is Trey Tucker. I want to see him clean up his mistakes. He had the potential to have a pretty good game against the 49ers. And I think he flashed what his abilities were, his abilities to get open. You've seen a little bit of that speed element that the Raiders didn't have last year. I just need to see him execute. You got to haul the ball in. The ball can't hit the turf anymore. So this game, my big projection for him, no drop balls. I don't care if you're targeted twice. I don't want to see the ball hit the ground. Everything thrown your way, as long as it's catchable, I want to see him come down with it. So for me, offensively, those are kind of the guys that I've got penciled in. Obviously, Cole Fotheringham, can he build off and push for that backup tight end spot? He's having a remarkable camp. Go ahead.
And speaking about Trey Tucker, we got something from him as well. Oh man.
Like during, I think it was 11 on 11, you came up with a deep touchdown from Brian Hoyer. How'd that play kind of come together for you?
Just preparation. We've run that play so many times all throughout fall camp. So for me, it's just like taking another play, knowing what I'm doing. That's the biggest thing, knowing your assignment. And I knew my assignment on that, so it allows me to play fast.
Obviously, everybody already knew you're a fast guy, but Coach McDaniel said something that you made progress on is all the receiver stuff that helps you get open. Obviously, how much progress do you feel like you've made since you got drafted?
I have a great room, obviously, as you guys know. They've helped me come along, you know what I mean? So thanks to those guys, and I'm continuing to progress as fall camp goes. I don't think it never stops. So for me, just taking all the years that I have in my group and just trying to apply it to myself, and to try to be the best player I can be for myself and for the team.
Man, I like what he had to say. And if you guys missed it, he was referring to that first question. He was referring to the big 70-yard touchdown play from Jimmy G during one of the practices with the Rams. which you love hearing too, by the way. You know what I mean? Jimmy G, if that's one of the question marks about his game is if he can consistently, throw it downfield, which, I think, in my opinion, I don't think that's going to be our offense this year based off the types of players we have and the type of player that Jimmy G is. I think that Josh McDaniels is going to build an offense. It's going to be the same offense, but he's going to build around certain strengths. And this is based off what they've been saying. Jimmy G talking about how he got together with Josh McDaniels this offseason and trying to figure out like what routes and what plays that he liked to run with the Niners, because it's been a while since he's teamed up with Josh McDaniels. So I think that it's going to be a little bit of a dinky and dunk, but a short to intermediate, and hopefully we can get some deep ball action, you know what I mean, every now and then to keep the defense honest. But I think that that's going to be our offense, because you got two receivers that they're versatile to go in. Like, not two receivers, we got three receivers that can go inside, outside. Four receivers if you include Trey Tucker, who just had that soundbite right now, that can go inside, that can go outside, and they can move them around. And that's because that versatility of to have that type of room, especially with a quarterback like Jimmy G, who likes to attack the middle of the field. That's a big plus.
Yeah, and look, you finished it off perfectly. I think this has been a remarkable show. I think Raider Nation, we've got a lot to look forward to heading into this game on Saturday. You should be fired up. I know we're fired up. And thank you guys for your your engagement. Make sure, if you guys have not yet, and if this is your first time finding this channel, make sure you guys smash the subscribe button to myself and Pharaoh NFL. We switch shows every single week, so next week we'll be on his channel. So you want to make sure that you're subscribed to both channels and hit that bell notification icon. That way you're alerted every single time we go live or drop a video like this. Thank you guys so much. You guys are awesome in the chat. You guys are continuing to support us, and we couldn't do it without you. Pharaoh, do you have any closing statements before we wrap this up?
Man, should we end it the way we always ended?
Just win, baby.
See you guys.
Hey.